to make supplication, prayer, and to approach the throne through Him. And excuse me, it's in spirit and truth. So very really that at the heart of the individual's existence and their persistence on maintaining to the word and obedience, that the individual could be vindicated and work out their own salvation. That there was no need for anything else outside of the individual and their connectivity to Christ. That was it. That was all that was necessary. So the individual came in the picture finally, as the individual was not ever in the picture at any point in time of all of history. The concept of the individual emerged out of Christian thought and was changed and morphed through Romanticism. The concept of equality before the state, or equality before the logos, equality before the truth, equality before something, as in the individual in all of their differences did not matter, as in there is equality within the inherent aspects of them. For there are many arguments. One argument that individuals were made in the image of God, so individuals necessarily had intrinsic worth and value to them. The other argument comes from the New Testament and saying that under Christ there is no sex, there is no race, there is no creed, there is no nationality, there is nothing. All is one under Christ, as in God is impartial and He sees no differences in people. So people get the same same value ascribed to them. Those are the very roots and the basis of our democratic society as we understand it now, because it was a morphing between the democratic state and the Greek state, the Phoenician state, the aggregation of the ideas of the republic. But very really that, if you say that there are a number of other things. Those are just the ones that come to mind immediately right now for myself. But there are a number of things. If you're saying that, very really, this is one thing that I get annoyed with a lot of scientists, is that there's no such thing as a philosophy-free science. The philosophy gets smuggled in without being checked or criticized, but there are very real rules of assumptions and propositions as epistemological structures that make the foundation of science and empiricism, logical positivism, that makes the insights and the investigative measures and quantitative reasoning and things like that possible, as one will always have to use critical thinking, and one will always have to have certain buttresses and pillars to structure their worldview as to make valid scientific conclusions. And it's just that if you think that all those things came independently of other things, that you have the Greeks to think for things, you have the Christians to think for things, you have St. Thomas Aquinas to think for things, you have Augustus to think for things, you have Socrates to think for things, you have Plato to think for things, you have Aristotle to think for things. It's just this modern sense in saying, oh, well, Aristotle was completely wrong, Plato was completely wrong, Socrates was completely wrong, they're all in contradiction to one another, Christians were just completely wrong. You're stupid. Knowledge is a process. It's been an aggregation over time. I don't agree with everything that Hegel says, but when he said that knowledge should be looked at as an emergent structure, as in it has been the aggregation, the synthesis of antithesis and thesis over time, and that there's been the compounding and the amalgamation as in the directive and the movement towards a certain end in some ways, I don't think that knowledge will ever be complete or perfect, but very really that things have built off of one another. Nothing is in a vacuum. It's just that's not true. It's just not true at all. And so when people are like, there's nothing good about Christianity, I'm like, well, dude, you're naive. You're very naive. I'm not even a Christian, but I can see that there are things that I have the Jesuit thought to be grateful for in terms of the things that it instituted. in terms of just the way that it conceived the state in some respects. And the idea of separation between the idea of a higher law in some respects, as in that there was a right to stand in opposition to a state, that very really the impetus for civil disobedience, protest, and action doesn't come from the conception of pagan states or monarchies or anything like that, but very really come from the Christian standpoint. It's like all these leftists and social justice warriors are like, yeah, the hell with Christianity. It's like you wouldn't have, like the whole conception of you wouldn't exist if there wasn't such thing as civil disobedience. None of these things would be a thing if there was not the idea of the prophet, if there was not the idea of a higher order moral principle or law being able to stand in the face of man-made propositions and laws. We now use reason, logic, and statistics to make our facts, but King, Thoreau, Gandhi, and all these others that you get your stock and impetus from, the very image that you bear, per se, is not. It comes from religion. You're just stupid. You're just too dang stupid. You don't know your culture. You think you know something because you went to university, but you really don't know anything. You just don't. But it's like but anyways, those things annoy me. They just annoy me because it's propaganda. It's ideology. I'm an atheist, and I can see that a lot of the atheistic rhetoric is just propaganda and ideology. It's an ideology that is founded upon statism and a certain type of secularism, secular humanism, but with an emphasis on statism, as in social, political leanings. Now, the thing is that it's unconstitutional, very really, for the eradication of religion. It's just not like you know, it's just, I don't have to believe. So one, I find Christianity contradictory. I find it incomplete. I think there are redeeming qualities to it, but there's a lot of things that I don't like about it. I find it logically, I said it, inconsistent. It's just, it does not work for me as a belief, and it's completely antithetical to material explanation for things. And if I'm gonna trust medicine, and I'm going to you know, if I'm going to trust science to do some things, I'm just going to trust it for other things as well. That's just what makes sense, honestly. I just have to be consistent as an individual. And it's just completely antithetical to it, very really. As if you do not consider the Genesis account to be poetry and a metaphor, it's not science, very really. So, I mean, like, for those reasons, I choose to be non-religious. But one thing I will say is that I respect anybody's right, and I will defend anybody's right to believe whatever it is that they want to believe, so long as they're not enforcing it on anybody else, and so long as they can live in equanimity with differing beliefs, very really. It's not even to be tolerant necessarily, but if a man cannot say what he thinks is false, if he cannot take and have a debate, if he cannot speak to his fellow statesmen about his concerns, if we cannot disagree but agree on the greater meta or stabilitating issues, in terms of, you know, you may not like the fact that I'm an atheist, but very really we know that fiscal gain has to be the concern of a capitalistic state, for that's the nature of the state itself, and we know that the individual has to sit within the state in a position of presenting value to a marketplace. So how do we make schools and how do we make systems better conducive for facilitating that aim and that end? Very really, and that's one thing I would say to the theologian. And I don't have to agree with you, and I don't have to believe what you believe. We don't have to believe the same things, but we do have to agree in terms of what is for the betterment of societies, very really. And my secularism, I think that secularism, in this sense that all religions have the freedom to exist under a secular state, when secularists aren't upholding to ideologies, very really, that so long as we all agree that we do not have to agree on everything, and we have the right to our beliefs, and beliefs are private issues, and are not issues and matters of the state, very really, as in there is a separation between church and state, so long as everybody abides that damn thing, we can be good. We can very much coexist. But, very really, one thing I will say to a Christian is creationism is not a science. This is one thing that grinds my gears or cranks my shaft, whichever way you want to say it. Creationism is not a science. It's just not. Now, so it should not be taught in a biology classroom. It really shouldn't. I hate that. It's biology is predicated on the theory of evolution. There is no biology without the theory of evolution. A theory of evolution. Biology is founded upon it. That is what makes the field itself. Evolutionary theory. You do not have biology without evolutionary theory. And I will say this, that if I said to theists that atheists and scientists should be allowed to come into science classrooms and teach evolutionary theory as a counter view to creationism, you would find that unacceptable and not tenable in a not tenable position. Now, wouldn't you? So I think that if you look at it from that vantage point, as in theology should be taught in churches and seminaries, and biology and other disciplines of science should be taught in science classrooms, then we can agree to be separate but equal in some ways, as in we have the right to teach what we would teach in respects to the given domains themselves. Like, you shouldn't go into a math classroom and start teaching music theory. That's stupid. But that's, like, whatever. Anyways, the point is, it's because this is supposed to be a critique to atheists. This is the point that I find most atheists, quite honestly, insufferable, as in their ideologues. The majority, like the popular atheists. It's not all atheists, but I find like the most popular ones, as in people who typically like Daniel Dennett and who like Sam Harris and who like Christopher Hitchens and Lawrence Krauss. I typically do not get along with them because it's political. It's so political in some respects, as in there is the same tendency for staunch liberality or conservatism in the face of the staunch fidelity to those positions that flies in the face of rationality that I can't agree with. I'm a rational independent, and I'm rational first before I'm anything else. I'm rational and I'm logical before I'm anything else. Then I am an American. Then I am an atheist. And I'm not necessarily just an atheist. I'm an existential humanist. I just say that I'm an atheist as to give myself a title that most people can get a gist for my positions on things, as in I'm not going to agree with supernatural or paranormal phenomenon, and I can't disprove the existence of a God, but I think it's highly unlikely that a God exists given the material world, and so I choose not to have any faith or belief. And it's a choice, because I very much concede that it's a choice, but it's the one that makes the most sense to me, and I gotta choose in some respects. As even the choice of just being indifferent is a choice, and really I'm indifferent in a lot of ways. That's the best way to describe me. But I find that most of Western culture is insufferable, and I would put modern atheism in that camp, or really Western or American atheism. I don't know about British or German or anything like that, as the European tradition is very old and steeped in much more, has greater amounts of wisdom. But yeah, Richard Dawkins is freaking British. You know, so is Christopher Hitchens. So to hell with that theory. But it's just to say that no, there's a lot of ways that atheists get it wrong, and there's a lot of ways that Christians get it wrong. There's a lot of ways that scientists get it wrong. There's a lot of ways that a lot of different groups of politicians, a lot of different groups, businessmen, get it wrong. But it's because we don't live on, it's one, I swear, it's falling in love with our own domains and never being interdisciplinary in our communication. Two, it's always thinking that we have to be with like-minded people, and that differences, contentions, and disagreements aren't good for the creative process, as constraints and stress is just necessary. Also, that anonymity is something that, you know, there used to be a thing where people could be enemies but have respect for one another, and it's like that's just gone out the damn window. As in, I don't get what the hell's wrong with the modern world in a lot of ways, but we're not individuals. I just guess that. We pretend as if we live in vacuums, and we pretend as if fields and domains are totally independent and own the rights to the claims to certain things, but knowledge is a process, and communities construct any domain. I don't know. It's just that modern atheists, most people are insufferable to me in some ways. They are, but I tolerate them nonetheless. This was just a critique, and I'll probably make another one, as I do not like the ending structure of this video, but hopefully found it interesting, and I expect many people to dislike this video and disagree with it. Thank you for watching.